is traditionally the Sunday that we talk about the temptation narrative, that first scripture that Lewis read for us this morning. If it were from the Gospel of Mark, it would be terribly short. Jesus is baptized, and then it just says, and the Spirit immediately drove him out into the wilderness. Everything in Mark is immediate. He was in the wilderness 40 days, tempted by Satan, and he was with the wild beasts, and the angels waited on him. The end. It's in Matthew and Luke that we get the more extended narratives that we're familiar with of the temptation. Matthew's is probably the one that if you remember, it's probably the one you remember. Its sequencing makes the most sense. We go from little to big, or from lesser to greater temptation. Stones to bread, throw yourself down from the pinnacle of the temple. All this will be yours if only you worship me. And then when all is said and done, who is it that comes to minister to him? It is the angels. They probably didn't, a lot of them really didn't have wings, but I didn't know exactly. I guess I could do a halo. I don't know else how to signal it to you. Matthew's account shapes a lot of the way that we think about not just Jesus' temptation, but temptation in general. In Matthew's account, we come to think of temptation as being sort of a preparatory season. Jesus goes through all this stuff, and then he graduates from temptation school and moves on with his ministry. And we often think about that for those of us who are parents, if we're not careful about it, thinking that all we have to do is steward our kids through that initial season of their youth, and then they'll be all set. We hope they avoid temptations of alcohol abuse, other drugs, smoking, vaping, getting in deep with a bad crowd, sexual indiscretions that could be potentially life-altering, lapses in judgment, other self-destructive behavior. And once they've gotten through that season, we're all set, and on they go to adult. When they come out on the other side, we and the angels have attended to them, and we figure they've made it. Luke's temptation account, however, is different, and I think more realistic. Now, the most notable thing that's different in Luke's story is that the sequencing is different. You still get to start with, turn these stones into bread, but then the second thing, it jumps straight to, look at all the kingdoms of the world. All you have to do is worship me, and all this will be yours. And the climax of Luke's temptation is the Spirit sweeping him away to Jerusalem and putting him up at the pinnacle of the temple. And the devil says, throw yourself down, because you know that the angels will protect you. You'll never hit the ground. They'll come sweeping in lest your foot be dashed against a stone. The devil quotes scripture here. This is from, believe it's Psalm 91. It's one of the Psalms, the same psalm that gets quoted in the hymn On Eagle's Wings. Lest you dash your foot against a stone, and he will raise you up. Exactly. In Luke's gospel, this makes sense because everything from the point of the transfiguration that we celebrated or observed last week on leads to Jerusalem. So, of course, Jerusalem and the temple is kind of the climax of Luke's account. And there's a whole batch of importance that's around that for everything being leading towards Jerusalem and the events that will happen there for Holy Week. But I think more importantly for our understanding today, for our purposes today, is the fact that in Luke's account, there are no angels that come to minister to Jesus after the temptation. Luke's account just ends with, and the devil left him until an opportune time. Fast forward several chapters. At an opportune time, the devil entered into Judas Iscariot. When do angels come to minister to Jesus? after the second of the scriptures today, after he's prayed in Gethsemane. Because that is the last of his temptations. The last time that he could get out of doing what God was wanting him to do. And instead of praying for the legions of angels to come and sweep him away, he prays, Father, not my will, but yours be done. And then the angels come and care for him. Temptation for Jesus, as for us, is not simply a season, but a lifelong condition. Like Jesus, we too are tempted to commodify everything for our own use and consumption, whether it's the stones turning to bread or the labor of exploited workers being turned into cheap goods. Anything to make some bread, make a buck. We too are tempted to set aside heavenly principles for earthly practicalities, to sacrifice kingdom values on the altars of politics, power, riches, and status. We are tempted, as the devil tried to tempt Jesus at the temple, to believe that we are too special to fall, too chosen to fail. And sometimes when we do fall and fail and dash our feet against life's stones, we become indignant. Why us? We're good people, God. And yet good people are not immune to suffering. In fact, Jesus warns us in the Sermon on the Mount that if you follow me, you're pretty much guaranteed to have some level of suffering. I remember, I'm going to steal this from you, Sue. Sue Erickson has often shared, so I assume that it's for public consumption as much as she shared it, that when she found out she had breast cancer, some years ago now, instead of asking herself what many of us would ask, why me? She thought about it long enough and prayerfully enough to say, well, why not me? Others have suffered. Why should I be immune? And that level of faith pulled her through, and that has been a great witness to all of us that you have shared that with. When we think of temptations, we often think of specific vices or violations. But if the two great commandments are love of God and love of neighbor, there we go. I wanted to make sure you're still with me. Love of God and love of neighbor. If that is the case, then the most pernicious of temptations are those things that would turn us away from either God or each other. One of my favorite Lenten hymns that I'm sure we will do at some point is Go to Dark Gethsemane. Do you remember that first verse? Go to dark Gethsemane, ye that feel the tempter's power, your Redeemer's conflict see. Watch with him one bitter hour. Turn not from his griefs away. Learn of Jesus Christ to pray. As the disciples fell away, unable and unwilling to remain with Jesus in the time of his anguish, so we, if we're honest, are often tempted to turn away from others in their time of suffering. It's hard. We shun painful interactions. We turn away from the trials that inevitably come with compassion. We turn away not in malice, but often in uncertainty, or feeling inadequate, or fearful of the level of sacrifice. As we turn away from God and others, it forces us, it allows us to turn inward into ourselves. We insulate ourselves with those who are like us, with people from our own tribes, It's easy to be tempted to the small, the safe. One of my other favorite Lenten hymns that we did sing Ash Wednesday is Lord, who throughout these 40 days, as thou didst hunger, bear, and thirst, so teach us, gracious Lord, to die to self and chiefly live by thy most holy word. That holiest of words, Jesus' injunction for us to love God and to love neighbor. So let us do our utmost in this season of Lent and in every season going forward to put away those things that would cause us to turn away from each other, that would cause us to turn only to self. Let us exchange fear for faith. Let us exchange temptation for exaltation.